And
Were you doing active duty then with the Navy already?
yeah, I was on a salvage boat. I was a hard hat diver and salvage diver,
Okay.
dive officer, and then driving the salvage ship. So I was
Cool.
an officer of the deck. I was a damage control assistant. I was a supply officer, and I was a BDO, basic dive officer. So I was a dive officer on the ship.
Yeah, and the diving aspect you learned in the service.
Yes, they sent me to hard hat diving school, salvage school, and taught me how to do all that.
Wow. Which is actually a good precursor to what you needed later. I mean, it doesn't translate 100%, but it does. It's kind of leading in that direction. It's a form of specialty, high level specialty that probably gives you some respect when you come into buds.
Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time. You know, I was kind of angry around the whole scenario, but I look back on it now, and you know, I everything happens for a reason, right? Yeah. Having that time in the regular Navy and in the diving Navy and driving ships and understanding how the big Navy really works, and bringing that knowledge into special operations, I can't tell you how many times that helped me. Because on my uniform, I wore Trident, but below the Trident, instead of jump wings, I wore my SWO pin, my surface warfare officer pin. So when I would go into a meeting, or if I was going into a scenario where I had to convince a senior officer that we would be the force of choice, if the senior officer was a carrier battle group or a Marine expeditionary unit senior officer, as soon as they see that SWO pin, you're like part of their club.
I wish
it really helps.
I hope that the listeners understand this. This resonates with me completely, because that is, with my limited military exposure, was really limited. This is something that I've always realized, and also in my business transactions. When you're in trouble, you want special forces in whatever format it might be, right? If you're in trouble in a company, you want a project manager who's crazy enough to take an impossible mission, kind of the Dirty Dozen thing.
Absolutely.
But I do find, and very few people are willing to talk about it in the business world, but one of my favorite stories I love to tell is I once was working with a telecom company who spent literally millions training their whole staff in project management concepts and standards and framework. And they really spent millions over 7 different countries. And they even had the title of senior portfolio manager, which means that it was basically the umbrella organization for all the projects. And they literally, and very few companies have a title like this. So I thought, wow, these guys are really advanced. And this portfolio manager, during one of the coffee breaks, and they had a meeting with the executive level and the C level, and he walked up to the CEO, who was a very well-known person, walked up to him during the coffee break and said, sir, I'd like to talk to you about, some of the operational aspects of project management. And he looked at him. He was just making his own coffee. He looked at him kind of disgustedly, and I was there when it was, and he says, you know what, leave me out of that operational crap. I'm not interested. So when I did my interview with my colonel and we talked about special ops, he opened up to it, but he also closed down right away, because he started saying, yeah, but you always have to watch out for special ops. They go rogue and they're uncontrollable, and then you can't reintegrate them into the large organization. But what you're saying is worth gold, because, and I think I'm going to say this differently. I think we often struggle to find our career, and I often think our career finds us.
Yeah,
you learn the things that you
100%.
should, and I think it made a huge difference. I would agree with you, although I wasn't that intimately familiar with your background. I think the very fact, and this is also for probably, if you can talk the language of executives, because they speak a different language, if you can talk, general staff language, and they recognize you for understanding their pain points, I think you have a whole different platform to talk to. So that's very interesting that you say that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it would apply in a lot of aspects outside the military too.
Yeah.
If you're a consultant and you have no background, true, real background,
if you've never
in
done
what it
before,
is that organization's doing, you're not going to have those guys respect coming out in the door. If you spent time in that organization, walking in the door, now you're a little bit more of a known commodity.
Because it is the dominant culture. It is the power base of the organization. And in reality, special ops and project teams, they serve a larger, sphere.